The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show with me, Charles Christian. What's new? Well, not a lot here in the UK as we're still in COVID lockdown, and at the time of recording this show we're also snowed in with the heaviest snow we've seen since the beast of the East storm in February 2018. More about snow later on after this week's interview, but first we need to talk about Doctor Who, the long-running BBC television series. Last week, our guest was Dr. Una McCormack, talking about, among other things, the Doctor Who TV series. But a lot of you disagreed with what she had to say. We had one listener from the US commenting, after seeing this year's New Year's Day Doctor Who special, "Who will save the Doctor?" And we also had Mike Tocci writing in via our YouTube page to say, I'm going to quote him now, "From 1963 to at least the David Tennant era, it was a great show filled with interesting characters and all kinds of magical stories. It grabbed me as a little kid here in America. It was so foreign to my 5-year-old mind, but still so fascinating. Watching repeats of first Tom Baker and then William Hartnell." He adds, "I was at the mercy of PBS and the order in which they broadcast the episodes. I was travelling right along with the Doctor and the company in the TARDIS, loving every minute. As a teenager, I only got more into the shows, discovering every Doctor and buying the videotapes and scavenging for any memorabilia I could find. In my 20s, I bought every single DVD released and was thrilled to watch bootlegs of the newly resurrected show with Eccleston and Tennant. Then Steve Moffat took over as showrunner, and Doctor Who became kind of dull and stupid as a show. Everyone else seemed to like Matt Smith, so okay, maybe that was just me. But Peter Capaldi, a great actor, he had to deal with bad scripts and even worse companions. Then the dark times really arrived with Chris Chibnall and his chosen Doctor with the single facial expression. The ratings are currently lowest in show history. Fans have left in droves. It's been run by political ideologues who value condescending to the audience and being preachy over telling a good story. It's become ridiculous and everyone is aware of it. What a sad end to a great show and icon of modern mythology." It's interesting comments you've got there, Mike. I'm ancient enough to have seen the original William Hartnell series when they originally went out in the early 60s. And have followed it more or less continually over the years. But I confess I too lost the will to live with Matt Smith and have still not bothered to catch up on some of the shows I missed when he was the Doctor. I totally agree the scripts started falling into a black hole from Smith onwards. Some of the ones foisted on Capaldi were frankly embarrassing. I also agree there's been a problem in recent years with the companions. Often the fact there are too many of them. It's now like some of those annoying radio shows where the DJ has a posse of sidekicks to pad out the show. Jodie Whittaker I quite like, but she undoubtedly has the worst scripts of all. Kind of Doctor Who as a Timmy Mallet era, you'll have to Google that if you don't live in the UK. Timmy Mallet era kids TV presenter. And there are now rumours floating around that the show may be dropped altogether. When the original series was cancelled in the 1980s, when Sylvester McCoy was the 7th Doctor, the excuse was falling ratings, but ignoring the fact most of the scripts were lame and involved the Doctor running around the same quarry in Wales, while the show got pushed out on some obscure time late at night during the week. But now, the ratings are falling again because the scripts are so terrible. What can be done about it? Well, I think a good example is what Disney did with the Star Wars franchise when they launched the Mandalorian TV series. They got all away from the terrible first prequels, and they also got away from the equally bad Last of the Jedi, Rise of Skywalker sequels. Instead, they made it Star Wars with a character who had a Clint Eastwood spaghetti western vibe to him. Perhaps a bit like The War Doctor by John Hurt, one of those one-off episodes that the BBC experimented with to celebrate the show's 50th anniversary in 1913. Not 1913, stupid, 2013. I'm a time traveller myself. Bit gritty, a bit dark. That's what we need to go for. I think they just lost the plot. Who are they aiming for? Young kids? Yeah, but are they going to follow it later if the show is lame, or will they just think, oh, why did I watch this? Anyway, out of my hands, and who knows? It went off the air for a quarter of a century after Sylvester McCoy. Maybe in a quarter of a century time we'll come back again and it'll be better. Anyway, so much for Doctor Who. Now for this week's interview, where we head from geek and pop culture back into the world of Wicca and witchcraft covens in the United States. Did you know there are now more practicing Wiccans in the US than there actually are Presbyterian Christians in the US? Yep, that many of them. Latest figures somewhere over 1.5 million. Anyway, our guest is Aidan Kelly, who was one of the founders of the Wiccan scene in the US and has now been involved in the craft for nearly 55 years. He co-founded the New Reformed Orthodox Order of the Golden Dawn in California in 1967, which was originally a Wiccan coven, and in 1975 he helped set up the Covenant of the Goddess to act as an umbrella group for all the diverse covens and Wiccan groups in the US. He has a PhD in Advanced Humanities and has worked as a college-level teacher and freelance editor for most of his career. He is the author of a number of books on witchcraft, as well as collections of his own poetry, and you can find him online at www.amazon.com/author/Aidan Kelly. You'll find the link on our website and our YouTube page. Aidan Kelly, good to be talking to you. We've had a bit of a problematic communications issue, always the way with these things. Not helped by the time zones as well, but at last we make contact. So
yes, very good, Charles. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not a techie, but at least we're on the phone now.
Yes, I don't know whether we're third time lucky or 13th time lucky, but anyway, we're speaking. Now, you are the founder of the New Reformed Orthodox Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yes, that's right.
Which I've got a note here saying it evolved into a Wiccan coven in 1969. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did all that start? Because 1969 is still relatively early in the days of Wicca, if you like, being out in the open. So
yes,
you must have been sort of one of the pioneers of it in the US.
Yeah, I appear to have been. Now, what happened with me is that when I was 14, I went searching for more information about religion in general, discovered a book called Witches Still Live by a Theta Kenyon that was published in 1929. And it begins with a very good summary of Leland's book, Aradia, or The Gospel of the Witches of Tuscany. Mm-hmm. And, so in this book I discovered, wow, here's a religion focused on a goddess with a sort of female messiah figure, the Aradia, about this religion that free love and dancing naked around bonfires and opposing the church, feeling oppressed by it, as I did. And that was great. My thought was, I'd like to have a religion like this if I could ever find it.
Yes.
Well, about 3 years later, I found Gardner's Witchcraft Today in the public library, recognized the same sort of witchcraft because it's partly based on the Aradia. Mm-hmm. and started gathering information about that. There are half a dozen books over the next almost 10 years. They're really important. So in the fall of 1967, I was in graduate work at San Francisco State, and so was an old girlfriend. Well, I still really hadn't gotten quite over her. But she came up, and she was taking a course on ritual from the poet, filmmaker James Broughton. Mm-hmm. And the term assignment was to come up with a ritual the whole class could participate in. So she asked me if I had enough information about this British witchcraft stuff to actually come up with a ritual. And well, at that point I did. It took a lot more writing. So we got, a committer of 13, as it happened, got together to rehearse this ritual. Mm-hmm. And we did it for her class. And it went okay, but we've been speculating when we were rehearsing about whether this was supposed to produce some sort of altered state of consciousness for us. And after doing the rituals like a play, we didn't notice anything, but my crowd turned into kind of a weekend workshop, pagan study thing that we did for some months. And then for midsummer, we had a neighborhood picnic at a state park. Mm-hmm. There was a couple who wanted to get married, had ministerial credentials, Universal Life Church. So we used the ritual as a framework for that. And sitting around afterward, with beer and potato salad and like that, talking about it, we realized we were all saying, this time I think I felt something different. And then we got all excited, decided to do the ritual again, which we did for Lammas in 68. With all the bells and whistles, we had about 50 people dancing in a big circle in a redwood grove with drummers and so on. And we danced and we danced. And we got so stoned on the energy that we raised, we were all wandering around giggling afterward. And it really bonded us into the order,
Yeah.
And we were at first, continued to be a pagan and cult dancing society. And we started having rituals out in the public parks, which was perfectly safe in those days. Everything, the chaos going on, nobody was going to notice us.
Yeah.
So that went on for about 2 years, and we finally had the courage to meet as a coven and do the real ritual. And that worked, that coven went on for about 5 years and started spinning off other covens. And it's been going ever since, and the fact that we were able to go out and have rituals in public really helped encourage other people in the country who knew about the craft to try that too. And that really is part of what led to the whole festival thing. Mm-hmm. But, it was clear to Ray Buckland that Wicca was going to be an important religious movement, which is why I brought it to America.
Yeah.
And I'd had the same intuition by then. And we were right. It is. I mean, the Pew Research is a very good outfit. As reported, there are more pagans, most of them are witches, in the U.S. than there are Presbyterians.
Yeah.
So, Wicca and the whole religious movement is really on the map at this point. So I feel kind of good, I'm contributing to the benefits of society or something like that. So is that the kind of thing you need to know?
Yeah, because Ronald Hutton, who's obviously written about this subject extensively, the academic in the UK, he's very much of the opinion that Wicca is a genuine new religion. It's the the 20th century's contribution to religion, and it's Wicca. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know Ronald. We're sort of pen pals. He said some nice things about me. I appreciate that.
He actually seems to be a thoroughly nice person, I think.
Yeah.
But, that is interesting, because obviously you were at the very early days of it. Mm-hmm. And how has it progressed since those early beginnings? Because, obviously in the 80s you had all that satanic ritual abuse scare thing going on. We had it in the UK as well, which quite sensibly caused, quite reasonably, a lot of people engaged in Wicca decided to go underground just because it was easier than having been abused as child molesters and everything else. And
very much.
You know, you had to duck. So has it come back out more into the open now, or is it still?
Oh yeah. No, that satanic panic was really active back in the 80s. It really died out pretty soon, partly because the one guy I'm connected to through initiations and like that, Kerr Cahulan, founded the Officers of Avalon, who were pagan police officers. And I gave a paper on it. He knew about it. And he went around, convincing the police officers that this was all a fantasy. These people were not doing any such thing. And it was a good part of why it died out. And the Officers of Avalon are still very active, very much behind the scenes, calming people down.
Yes.
Well, in our case, after we'd had our coven together for about 2 years, we started connecting with other witches around the San Francisco area. And they were in touch with, national correspondence clubs and like this. And there had already started to be a movement, actually in 1967. A couple of people in Southern California were trying to get together kind of an umbrella church for all the alternative religions. And they've been working on that since then. And about 1974, there was a meeting in Burbank. A lot of these people, I got to meet a lot of new people, trying to work on this. And part of the problem was that these various New Age religions and other types of paganism like this really would like to have a church, but they didn't have enough common ground on beliefs and practices and so on to figure out how to have a structure that worked. Mm-hmm. So I and Gwydion Penderwen, songwriter that time, and some other people working together, and we finally thought as well, what if we had a church only for witches? That way we've got a common structure and code of ethics and so on. So maybe we could do that. But, of course, we're looking at this idea, and the problem we were facing is that, of course, witches don't believe you can become a witch by joining a church. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, they're not going to cede a church the authority to decide whether they're witches or not.
Yeah.
So how do you do this? Well, I recall that Cotton Mather, of all people, had commented that the witches of Salem Village were organized like Congregationalists. And, of course, those poor people probably were just Congregationalists, except maybe for Tituba. And that's a reason why many covens will simply read those people's names off as Samhain every year to remember them. Burn the names in the cauldron or something. But I wondered what the world Mather meant by that type of organization. So I was able to go into school archives and like that. I came up with the Constitution of the Congregationalists. And for them, it turned out that the individuals would belong to their congregations, but it was the congregation as a whole that was a member of the national church. And I looked at this and said, that would work. Witches are members of covens, and the coven could be the member of the church. Mm. So Gwydion and I were able to pull together a meeting of about 24 people of a dozen different Wiccan traditions and propose this idea to them. Went through a discussion and all agreed, yes, that made sense. So everybody at this meeting, several dozen people signed off on a piece of paper as a charter saying, yes, we want to form this church. And so we started working on that. And about 3 months later, we had people meet for the summer solstice at Gwydion's land up in Sonoma County and signed off this charter and brought the, we called it the Covenant of the Goddess, brought it into existence, and elected Allison Harlow as the first officer, because we didn't like the word president, for that first year, and went through all the procedures we thought up to, have a representative structure. And so the next year was the first official meeting of the Grand Council of all the members, and we elected Starhawk as the as the first officer.
Yeah.
And, COG's been going for 45 years now. And had a significant impact on religion in America. There was a Second World Parliamentary Religions in about 93, I think it was, met in Chicago. And Phyllis Curott, who was the first officer of COG at that point, was able to have a public ritual with members of practically every religion in the world in the circle. And she's an amazing woman, and she put on a spectacular performance, got front-page headlines all over the country about this goddess church for witches. And, COG has been on the map ever since. It's going strong and continues to attract members. And again, that way I help contribute to, the public benefit. Witches in America ever strong. At one point, President Bush had to apologize to a woman whose Wiccan husband was serving whatever war it was at that time. So having the president apologize to a witch was quite a step forward.
Yeah. Because I saw somewhere that the military casualties now can have the pentacle on their tombstones. Yes,
and that got put in place quite a while back. It was actually Selena Fox who spearheaded that. The Lady Liberty League just badgered the Defense Department to get that to happen. So there are pentacles on tombstones along with the Star of David and the cross and symbols of other religions.
Just so I've got it right, the New Reformed Orthodox author of the Golden Dawn, that is your coven, is that, or? Yeah,
that's the name of our order. When we were rehearsing the original ritual, Sarah, my girlfriend, said, her class was asking who we were. So we came up with that name, speculating about it. Yeah. But it was partly in honor of William Butler Yeats, one of my favorite poets, who was, head of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. With us, it was sort of tongue-in-cheek. It was a funny name. This is the day of Big Brother and the Holding Company and things like that. Yeah. But later on, some friends brought me some paperwork that after the Easter Sunday rebellion in Ireland, Yeats and other people formed the Order of the Four Jewels, and Ellie Young was a member of that. She came to California and started a local branch of that. And the idea of the Order of the Four Jewels was to celebrate the four Sabbats of the year. So they did. So my friends were able to bring me the paperwork for doing this, and I'm just sitting there looking at what my order has inherited, this actual mandate from Yeats to practice a pagan religion. Well, okay, fine. This is cool, Wicca, someone wrote recently that Wicca is the first genuinely new religion that Britain has introduced to the world, because that's what happened. I've been able to work out I saw, luckily, more than luck, all of Gardner's original papers. Yeah. And so I was able to work out this chronology of how we had gone about the writing. And then also, work out a history of what actually happened to cause this religion to start evolving, which it did back in the 15th century. Yeah. And went through all these changes. And in the late 19th century, there started being more speculation about witches being a leftover pagan religion. And that story grew that way. But no, it really is a modern creation, because all religions are human creations. Yes. We know starting dates and names and whatnot for practically all of them. So, my attitude is, maybe God did inspire the writing of the Bible and other things. But I noticed that even though he may inspire, he always has to recruit some particular human being to do the actual writing for him.
Yes.
And human beings are fallible. You can't take any of these creations as being flawless. And on that, Wicca stands up to as religion equals to Christianity or Buddhism or whatever. I mean, Gardner is this strange, eccentric Englishman.
Very much so, yes.
Was a major figure as a creative religions in history. And what I've written about him, I give him that respect, despite or maybe somewhat part because of his peculiarities, he was able to have this kind of inspiration. And William James wrote that, a guy who believed in following all the rules of society was never going to be able to create a genuinely new religion that would help people. He has to be able to break through the barriers and conventions to come up with something new that's going to benefit people in ways that the established churches and whatnot haven't been able to. And that's a good part of what's going on.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
You were mentioning there that the Wiccan stroke witchcraft as a religious movement's been going on since the 15th century. Do you, Margaret Murray's idea of witchcraft being a holdover from a long-established religious cult pre-Christian, that's come under a lot of attack in recent years.
Yeah, her later book, The God of the Witches, basically she comes up with this concept of a pagan religion. She describes it as it would have existed about the year 1300. And that one, the other historians are saying there's really no evidence for that. But her first book, The Witch Cult in Western Europe, she went through and looked at all of the records of the witch trials during the Burning Times and like this, and she discovered, some of it is simply the inquisitors reading this list of questions that you had to say yes to or they wouldn't stop torturing you. But she discovered there were also several groups, the witches of North Berwickshire, who King James interacted with, and the witches of Somerset, and so on, were obviously religious groups that would purposely pattern themselves on some sort of pagan religion. And that was what she was really talking about. And as it now works out, I had wondered, when I first read that book, that my thought was, I would bet some English occultists of some sort reading this book would immediately think, wow, this is a cool religion, let's see if we can recreate it. And I wasn't sure at first that was Gardner was doing, though I could figure out his sort of basic layer of assumptions was coming out of Murray's work. But recently, my friend Philip Hazelton, we were very parallel in this. He decided to go looking to see if Gardner had said he was initiated into an earlier coven. Now, I was finding any evidence that it existed, but Philip went out and found it just from the ordinary records. Has been able to reconstruct who those people were. And a main one, really almost the main one, was Edith Woodford Grimes, who was Gardner's lover and priestess and whatnot, using the name Dapo, which turns out to be her grandchildren's nickname for her. And there was a man named Ernie Mason, who was actually well known back in the 20s as a magus and healer and so on, and the government officials would come and consult him. And in 1922, Edith moved onto the same block as Mason's family, and they connected, and they were all occultists, Rosicrucians and Theosophists and like that. And that was when they had that idea of let's try recreating this religion of Murray's. Mm-hmm. And their coven went on for about almost 20 years before Gardner connected with it. But, that's the connection. I mean, there really is a real historical track, but it's intellectual,
Yeah.
rather than social organizations of some sort.
Yeah.
The fact is that what really triggered it was that in 1488, Pope Innocent III, though I think of him as Pope Guilty, issued this papal bull condemning witches as being heretics because they belong to a religion that worships Satan, and so on. Well, you can look back and think, well, people didn't believe they worship Satan, but what did they believe? And that's immediately an unexamined assumption. Because before then, witches weren't a religion, they were an occupation. Yeah. Your local witch was a healer and magician and made potions and so on. And they belonged to the same religion as everybody else. I mean, that's typical now. Your psychic readers are practicing witches, but generally consider themselves Protestants or something like that.
Yeah.
But, through the burning times, I mean, after 1480, you have 1492, you get Columbus, you get Ferdinand and Isabella expelling all the Jews from Spain. Then you get Martin Luther, about 30 years later, setting up the whole Civil War in Europe. And the burning times, witch persecutions were part of that Civil War. They weren't something that happened in the Middle Ages. They happened in modern times.
Yeah.
And that finally died out about the middle of the 17th century. And the persecution in Salem Village in 1697 was really an outlier, an anomaly from that. And, in the debate about the First Amendment, Patrick Henry said that the point of the First Amendment was to make sure that nothing like Salem Village could ever happen again. Our revolution was in good part about having real religious freedom. You didn't have to belong to the Church of England and have special privileges that other people didn't have. In America, you were going to have the right to have whatever religion you wanted, and you not only have the right to join any church you want, you have the right to start any church you want. Yeah. And that's happened. More new religions and churches have started in America since 1789, and most of the rest of history put together. Yeah. So the fact that Wicca could come flourish in America just really fits right to American tradition, that we do have the right to do this.
Interesting point, because, I mean, obviously, in the middle of the 19th century, you had the Mormons appear on the scene with a completely novel, for the time, religion, and one that has gone on to thrive.
Yeah.
Mm.
I do know a lot of Mormons. I think they're very good people. And there really are some unusual aspects of the way their church runs that, again, they're able to provide human needs in a way that some of the other churches simply have abdicated from,
What about Aradia? I mean, there has been some academic research into witchcraft in Tuscany to suggest that there is or was a continuing line from certainly the 19th century through back until the 15th, 14th century or even earlier. What do you think is the element there? Is that another outlier, you think, or?
Well, possibly. I haven't decided firmly one way or the other whether there was a historical Aradia. It's plausible enough. Certainly, the official church had gotten rather tyrannical, and you could see people rebelling against it. But she's perhaps much more of an archetypal figure. I mean, I think that Murray got this idea of witchcraft being a pagan religion from a writer named Jules Michelet, who wrote a book called The Sorcerer about the middle of the 19th century. And that's where she picked up the idea. But I think in good part, the Aradia story was another attempt to, create a religion, that was pagan in background. And that, a woman named apparently Madalena was doing that in the 1890s, and Charles Leland got that story from her. But, other people, I know as a scholar named Angela Verrazzano, who did her dissertation on Leland, and she says in the Leland archives there is not a clue about where the Aidans story came from. There are no documents or anything else. And at this point, it was just in touch with Gavin Bone, who's one of the leading Alexandrians, and he said he's talking to the witches down in Italy. He said they all feel Leland came up with it. It was another burst of inspiration.
Yeah.
But they don't know any evidence that there really was an Aradia. It's just an open thing. I know Carlo Ginzburg discovered there was an inscription, Gaelic or Saxon, something like that, about a Heredia. And that may be the real name of the Aradia. And Professor Lethbridge came up with the idea that Aradia is actually a form of a Gaelic goddess name that traces back in Irish mythology. So, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have this pattern of, say, Bridget, okay?
Yeah.
Bridget is a traditional Irish goddess name.
Yes.
But there's also evidence there was a real Saint Bridget,
yes,
who sort of archetypally combines this high concept of a Christian saint who is also a goddess.
Yes.
And you get, archetypal figures like that sort of scattered,
yes.
Through various types of classical pagan religions.
Yeah. What do you think of Robert Graves and the White Goddess? Are his views still relevant these days towards...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, very much. Now, Graves was very much one of the earliest books that I found absolutely inspired me. I think I read it through 8 times during the following years because it's a difficult book. I got a lot of inspiration out of it. But, and again, historians and other people criticize it up one side, down the other, but the book makes sense as theology, not history.
Yeah.
He was providing a lot of the basic concepts that have been integrated into the whole Wiccan movement. And, you read his writing and, what his family members have said since he passed on, and other people. That Graves considered himself to be a prophet of the goddess. He was consciously trying to inspire and invigorate a new religious awareness of her. He rather succeeded. It's a charming book. But finally, at one point, I realized that the book gave me a huge reading list to go through of all of his sources that he talks about. But finally, in the middle of my own doctoral program, it dawned on me the problem with Graves is that he's a poet. Mm-hmm. And at least half the material in The White Goddess was his invention. He's taking bits and pieces and just speculating on them and building up this picture. And it's a wonderful picture, but, taking it as being pure history is just about as damn silly as thinking that the Jewish scriptures are all, pure history.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are real history, like the Book of Ezra. And obviously, most of Genesis is almost pure mythology or something like that.
Yeah.
You have to have some real sense of trying to sort, what level and type of information is that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So, I love Graves, but I'm sensible about him.
One of the things that always comes up is, well, aren't people who are witches, and I appreciate there's a difference between saying you're a witch and saying you are following Wicca, aren't people who are witches, don't they practice magic of some sort? And then immediately people disappear into a kind of Harry Potter world where people are throwing thunderbolts backwards and forwards. And indeed, if you look at any of the social media groups for Wicca and witchcraft, it's full of, you get the impression, teenagers wanting to zap the boyfriend or girlfriend who won't go out with them, or who... Is there actually any magic involved, or as opposed to just a sense of personal empowerment with the rituals?
Yeah. Well, I believe there is. Magic isn't really different from psychic talents, the actual ability to almost do telepathy and clairvoyant readings and so on and so forth. And I'm teaching a course, actually I'm beginning a session on this Saturday, training people in the systems that I was trained in of actually how to do this systematically. Learn to become aware of it and use these other senses that we clearly have. And learning how to do this sort of thing takes time, and it does take discipline. It's not easy. I have teenagers saying, how do I work a spell? Do I just read it out of the book? Well, no, it's not the reading. It's the altered state of mind you're able to go into that starts getting things to happen. I think, we don't understand how our minds work.
That's correct, yes, definitely.
And Sir Roger Penrose, who delightfully won the Nobel Prize last year, had a book in which he points out that he argues that, we need to have a theory as far beyond quantum mechanics as that's far beyond Newton before we'll have a clue how our minds work. It's a long way to go. So, we're just working with the surface of it. But I was an editor for Scientific American Books on staff for 5 years and freelancing for them afterward. And wonderful job, and I got to make friends with some astonishing physicists. I learned a lot about all this. And I think what happens with magic is we're tapping into quantum phenomena that just a little bit can take a 1 or 0 value and set off an entirely different tree of evolution. And while our conscious minds don't know how to do this, the subconscious mind, the most important part of our minds, does know how to do this and does do it. We may not know why, but it can actually change reality. And by learning to work with that part of the mind, sometimes you can flip over reality if the other side, which is rather like a divine being, thinks that's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like saying you have if you're doing prayer. Prayer has 4 possible answers: yes, no, later, and forget it. Well, sometimes that other mind might tend to think it was a goddess or the muse or whatnot. We'll do what you like, but it's always a decision. It's never a mechanical thing at all. So no, I just part of my reason for getting this course going was just reading on Facebook of young people, teenagers saying, "Oh, I just discovered I'm a pagan. What do I do now?" Or how do I work a spell and put hexes on people and why? I'm thinking, oh,
yeah,
these kids are how do they learn how to sort out the real information from the bafflegab? And they don't know what the criteria would be. So I was hoping, well, maybe I can help enlighten them. So I'm teaching a lot of coven leaders and like this to try to get some sort of raise of consciousness about, no, this is a real religion. It takes work. You're not going to learn how to work magic or spells or whatnot, without going through the discipline. There's no other way to do it. So I think I'm contributing to something. The course has been going fine. I'm really looking forward to this new session.
Yeah.
And I publish. I've got a dozen books available up on Amazon.
Yeah.
I love self-publishing.
Yeah.
I have my own publishing company. I just don't have $1 million for a promotion.
Yeah.
And I got tired of arguing with the brick and mortar publishers about whether what I was writing was viable or not.
Yeah.
I'm 80. I don't have time to wait around for them.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But I have to say, I love the title. Sounds like one of your earliest books, Hippie, Commie, Beatnik Witches, a social history of the
that was
Orthodox.
fun to come up with.
That's a great one, that. Yeah, and just tell us a bit more then about these courses. Where can people find out about them? Because I've got your Amazon link for your books, so I can give that. But where would people go if they wanted to find out about your courses?
Well, basically, just write to my email.
Just for your email, right? I've got that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's, Kelly_Aidan@yahoo.com. And I can send them an outline and what's involved. I mean, well, my current course is like 2 days away. People all of a sudden jumped on this. And what I did the last time, first I offered the course, I was doing it on Sunday afternoons, and that just did not work out well. But this time I'm doing it at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. So what happens is people in Britain could log into the course between 10 p.m. and midnight on that Saturday, which is doable. And on the other hand, in Australia, they could log in at 8:30 on the next Sunday morning, the next day.
Yeah.
Because I did have one person sign up for the class in Australia and discovered he would have to log on at 5:30 Monday morning. That certainly didn't work for him.
No.
So I think I've kind of rectified that.
Yeah. No, that's a good time. That.
I'm able to. I've been working on this stuff for like 55 years, and I've got a lot of information that's very, very useful for working on the crap. And I don't go into the kind of things that people consider to be oath-bound and come in business and you can't talk to anybody. This is stuff I've learned from my own research, from being trained in other systems and so on. But, it really helps people, and just in general, it is salutary to help people learn to trust their own intuition, to trust their own gut feelings, to wonder, well, how do I know that? Maybe I'd better pay attention to that. Especially funny feelings, when you make a logical decision about what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then you get a funny feeling, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Maybe I better not do that quite yet. Then you discover there was a fact you didn't know. Totally changes the equation,
Yeah.
But people who don't have the sense to do that, will get in trouble because logical decisions, probably are just plain wrong half the time,
Yep. No, I'm definitely with you on that one. There's a few decisions I've made in my time where instinct, gut reaction gut feeling tells you to go one way, but logic tells you to go another way. And logic turns out to be wrong.
And it's gut feelings that lead you to be kind.
Yeah.
Thus and such is, offering this person justice. And that's wrong, 95% of the time, be kind to people, care about people, like Carol Gilligan's, care ethic system. I mean, Gilligan is not well known, but she really is one of the great philosophers in modern times. That her care ethic system is just gradually permeating the justice system. And so judges listen to all the facts, not just the logic of it, and and make better decisions that way. Especially women judges.
Yeah. And what is the name of your course, just for...
Oh, dear. That's a course in psychic development. I mean, I talk a lot about Wicca in it. Yeah, course in psychic development.
Right. Okay. And what other projects are you working on besides that? Writing any more books or...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just got 3 more up on Amazon during the last couple of weeks. Partly because, I'm tired. Some of this I've been working on for years, and I'm probably saying, no, it's time to stop tinkering with this. Get it up and out, get it off the back burner. Frees up energy to do other stuff. But I've got a list of I don't know, about 20 possible books that I have ideas for or partial drafts of or almost finished and like this. I'm just trying to organize my time to get as much of this done as possible. I've certainly had the kind of career, and partly out of illness, that I don't have the fortune to leave my kids.
Yeah.
But I can leave them this legacy of my published books.
Yeah.
And I hope they turn out to be valuable for them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a perfect spot to end this conversation on. That's...
Well, okay. Well, thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad.
You're very well informed about all this stuff, and I appreciate that.
I'm glad we finally got to speak.
Me too.
Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thank you for your time too, Charles. It's been a good morning.
Good. Can't say better than that. Take care. Bye now.
All right, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, for all the wrong reasons, the US Capitol building in Washington, D.C. has been in the news recently. We're swerving the politics, as we're more interested in the building's ghosts, and in particular the legend of the Capitol Cat, otherwise known as the Demon Cat of D.C. Our story starts in the mid-19th century, when there were plenty of cats roaming the building to keep down the mice and rat population. But stories began to circulate among the night watchmen who patrolled the building about a particularly large cat that apparently could grow in size before leaping at a terrified guard, but then vanishing in mid-air. The suggestion is the story actually began with a drunken night watchman. Most of the night watchmen, it should be pointed out, in those days were not professionals, but people who had relatives who were involved in politics or in congressmen and who had pulled strings to find jobs for them. Anyway, one particular night watchman had a little bit too much to drink and fell asleep on the job, only to be woken up by a cat licking his face. In his alcoholic stupor, the cat's face, seen up so close, seemed enormous, and so the legend was born of a ghostly giant cat. Now, one of the factors keeping the story alive is that cat footprints, normal size, not giant size it should be noted, can be seen in the flagstones of the small Senate rotunda just outside the old Supreme Court chamber. What most people do not realise is these flagstones are not original. What happened is that in 1898 there was a gas explosion in the Capitol building, and in some places the damaged original stone flagstones were replaced with concrete. And then a cat walked across the wet concrete, as cats always do, leaving its footprints behind. Since then, the legend has grown up that a sighting of the ghostly Capitol Cat is the harbinger of national disaster, and it's claimed to have been seen on the eve of the assassinations of both President Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, as well as the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It'd be interesting to know if anybody has seen the cat in recent months.
Good day, gentlefolk. I doth have breaking news. Your Weird Tales host, Charles Christian, has written a new book called Saints and Sinners in Dark Age England. 5 shocking true tales that are stranger than fiction. There's murder, mayhem, treason, incest, adultery, and worse. Read about the real antics of 9 saints, yes, saints, 8 kings and 5 queens of England, plus the wickedest of all stepmothers, and be amazed, or horrified, or appalled, or all three. If you love weird history, and methinks you do, hop over to Amazon for your copy of Charles Christian's Saints and Sinners in Dark Age England. Grab yours now.
Now, I mentioned snow earlier on, and I have to report early this week that I made a truly woeful attempt to build a snowman. You'd be right in describing it as an abominable snowman. I know. Apologies for that terrible pun. Apparently the snow was too powdery and would not stick to itself. I know. Who knew there was a science of snowman building? However, did you know there are regional differences in snowmen design? In the US, snowmen are traditionally made of 3 spheres of snow. One for the lower body, one for the torso, and one for the head. Whereas in the UK it's just 2, the body and the head. The world record for the largest snowman ever is claimed by the town of Bethel in Maine, in the US, where in 2008 they created a snowman 122 feet tall. Technically, it was a snow woman, created in honour of the local popular US Senator, Olympia Snow with an E, I should add. Although, having seen photographs of the edifice, it actually looks more like a snow lighthouse, topped with a red hat. How long have people been creating snowmen? Hard to say, but a library in The Hague in Netherlands has a book of hours dating back to 1380 that features a snowman as a marginal illustration. After that date, they start cropping up quite frequently in woodcuts and prints, including some images of people, snowmen, engaged in activities that are distinctly not safe for work. And on that frosty note, it just remains for me to say, this is Charles Christian saying, thank you for listening in. Please join me again next time. Until then, stay well, stay weird. Goodbye.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, folklore, and the paranormal. You can keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com, by email to urbanfantasist@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Goodbye.